Good morning, everyone, and welcome to NPU Live. I'm Keri Rodriguez.
And I'm Tim Langan.
So excited to have you join us this morning. The beginning of week 10, Tim.
That's right.
Week
double
10
digits.
of the quarantine. We made it to double digits, and we're all, we're doing the best.
We're here. We're here.
We're present.
We're existing. We're existing.
We're not going to qualify it this morning. It's a Monday morning. It's a little gloomy here in Boston, but our hearts are full, and we're ready to jump into another week
That's
of
right.
exciting conversations. Great guests this week. Lots of coffee. Lots of coffee. That's right.
Good job.
Not too shabby. Not too much cream. He's sweet enough. He doesn't need too much. Anyway, so excited to have you with us. We've got breaking news this morning from the National Parents Union. Really excited about that. Our latest tracking poll with some really stunning results coming out. I'm very excited.
That's right, Keri. Yeah. Well, first, let's get into the daily stuff, and then you can take it away with the survey. There, we have unfortunately the numbers again for COVID-19 cases and deaths increasing. We are now up to 1.5 million cases nationwide and almost 90,000 deaths, unfortunately. With that, we were able to have a weekend, though, anyway, where we did celebrate the graduates of 2020, the high school graduates of 2020. During this time, many graduates who were looking forward to their proms, looking forward to their graduations, those important life moments, they couldn't happen.
And we were so excited to partner with XQ and the LeBron James Foundation to bring you that broadcast live on the National Parents Union, also shown on your broadcast channels. Really exciting. Lots of folks coming together to just get excited about the music, about President Obama. Just the whole vibe was awesome. So it was really cool.
That's right. And I think the big news that's coming out of this is President Obama, who's been very vocal the last couple of weeks, specifically around the current administration's treatment of this pandemic, came out and called on the graduating class of 2020 to lead, because since no one else is doing it, they will have to step up.
Yes, please, class of 2020.
Step up soon.
Oh my goodness, anybody step up, my goodness.
That's right.
Seriously, oh my goodness, how important it's going to be in 2020 to vote. To that end, too, the National Parents Union launching Every Family Votes in just a few weeks to make sure every family in America votes, does their job, making sure they participate, because Lord knows, if you haven't learned how important it is to have really steady and steadfast leadership, I don't know what to say.
That's it.
As we enter week 10
of the pandemic.
Whew, goodness.
One thing I want to make clear that while NPU did simulcast the Graduate 2020 show on Friday, we in no way condone the Jonas Brothers or their musical talent.
He was very upset.
I just want to talk about that.
The music snob over here.
I'm just saying.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, he was very upset. But yeah, a lot of the kids like
the kids. I guess so.
Anyway,
whatever.
Can we break the news now? Is it time?
Let's go.
All right. This morning, the National Parents Union releasing our new poll, a new nationwide survey released this morning, asking parents who they would trust to determine if schools are safe to reopen and how important certain measures are for schools to take. As many of you know, we actually have a task force in the National Parents Union dealing with an equity-infused education recovery, what that looks like, what it looks like from a health and safety standpoint, keeping children, families, and school communities safe and healthy, personalized learning plans for a trauma-informed recovery, remote and emergency learning now and in the future, how do we better plan for it, and equitable education financing, as well as some additional resources for supporting families. We're putting out our Bill of Rights this morning, really excited about that. You're gonna find it on our website, which is nationalparentsunion.org, but also the details of our new poll. So again, as I said, we asked parents who they would trust to determine if schools are safe to reopen and how important certain measures are for schools to take. Last week in our tracking poll, we told you, I mean, it was stunning. 81% of parents saying they are not ready to send their kids back to school. So we double clicked on that and said, okay, who do you trust to make the call? And what does it look like when kids go back to school? We really tested our Bill of Rights. Again, our task force made up of parent advocacy organizations and activists all across the country really doing a heroic work,
That's
coming
right.
together, hopping on Zoom calls, really digging in, viewing this from an equity lens,
Yep.
folks that are doing the work on the grassroots level all across the country saying, this is what we're hearing in the communities. These are our concerns, to really come up with that Bill of Rights. So we tested it to make sure whether their findings lined up with what American families across the country think. And guess what?
And what did we find?
You were right. Okay, so on the issue of who parents trust most to establish and evaluate school safety procedures, who makes the calls about when to open up schools, parents say that the CDC, #1 trusted source by 24%, then state and local public health officials, more trustworthy than any elected officials, any representatives, or even education officials. So really interesting perspective.
People are believing in the science.
They do. They trust public health officials, federal, state, and local public health officials. 50%, more than 50% of parents say those are the folks I'm looking to make the calls. They don't want to hear from elected officials. They do not want to hear even from education policymakers. They want to hear from scientists and doctors that it's okay. What is really interesting about this poll, the big elephant in the poll, as I was calling it, only 5% of parents across the nation. Now, again, we work with the Echelon Insights Group, Republican pollsters here. Certainly, when we did the poll, we have a bipartisan approach. We tested Democrats, Republicans, independents. Only 5% of American families trust Donald Trump to make the call about reopening schools. Only 5%. So families trust Fauci, not President Trump. So that's the straight dope.
Yikes,
right
numbers
there.
don't lie.
The numbers do not lie. But I will also say only about 8% of families trust local superintendents to make the calls about opening schools. Again, let's get into the numbers here. So the CDC, 24%, the state and local public health officials then at 14 and 12%. The state governor, only 9%, President Trump at 5%. The state legislature shows up at 1%, 1% support. The state departments of education, only 5%. So some stunning results. I think, that's going to be interesting.
Well, I think, the state legislature, it's early. I need some more coffee. Great guys, but I think they will even admit they're not scientists.
Not scientists, not doctors.
No.
Well, although in Massachusetts, we do have John Santiago, who is
There you
a
go.
doctor.
There you
I trust that guy.
I trust that guy.
He literally works in an emergency room. That's his real job. On the issue of how important certain measures are for schools to take. So this was our Bill of Rights. These are our terms as parents. What conditions do we need to see for us to say, okay, we're willing to send our kids back into school? This is what we found. On the issue of how important certain measures are for schools to take, #1, with a bullet, requiring students and staff members who may have been exposed to someone who has tested positive for COVID-19 to stay home for at least 14 days before returning to school. 81% of American families say that is extremely or very important. 56% of parents say this measure is absolutely necessary, and if it's not implemented, they will not send their kids to school, period. Next up on the poll, do you expect that schools send out notices to parents of students who may have been exposed to a student or staff member who has tested positive for COVID-19? 79% of American families say extremely or very important. Next, we believe schools should provide all students with technology needed for online learning at the beginning of the year in case they become ill or schools close again, including laptops or tablets and internet access. 76% of American families saying that is extremely or very important. Parents are not going to wait to play catch up. If this has to happen again, if we have not gotten it right, if we have another spike from day one, they want to make sure their kids have everything they need if we need to pivot again. Very clear in this poll. Parents also want schools to provide face masks to all students and staff and replace those masks regularly. 70% extremely or very important to American families. Parents also want schools to provide an individualized education plan for each student based on an assessment of their academic and mental health needs, as well as input from their parents or guardians. 65% saying that is extremely or very important. Also in this poll, without a doubt, providing mental and emotional health assessments and counseling for students and staff, 65% saying extremely or very important. Staggering schedules so that there are fewer students in the classroom and desks can be spaced 6 feet apart. 63% of American families saying that is extremely or very important. Again, this was a national poll of families conducted May 4th through 5th, 2020. By the Echelon Insights Group, a reputable national pollster, I should say, excuse me. But again, some stunning results, and it's very clear what parents want. So that's why today you will see the National Parents Union issuing our Bill of Rights.
That's right.
For K through 12 education for all schools. We're
That's
not
right.
just talking public, we're talking private. These are the conditions by which parents will trust that schools are prepared. And we get very specific. Let me tell you, the ladies who helped us put together this poll, Tim.
I heard it.
Whew, they put us
Yikes.
through the paces. You want CDC recommendations and guidelines. You want the American Academy of Pediatrics in consultation with the National Parents Union. You want to talk about the Environmental Protection Agency list and schedule of disinfectants. That is how in-depth.
I was right here trying to work, and I'm hearing screaming and yelling near the room. I had to shut the door
via Zoom. So anyway, that's the news for this morning. Ranging from the National Parents Union.
Nothing wrong with starting the week with the voice of parents and what they want.
I'm anxious to get some of the thoughts of our guests on our poll results.
Absolutely. And if you have thoughts you want to share, please put it right now on our Facebook page at the National Parents Union. Send your feedback or send it to info@npunion.org. That's info@npunion.org. And visit our page right now because we have a lot of guests, a lot of shows going on this week. It's an exciting week.
It is.
We're just not stopping with this poll.
That's right.
That's right.
We're going to be talking about the poll and these broadcasts reaching over 1 million families every week.
That's right.
And this one, I think this is going to be, we may even get higher than that this week.
I think we can. I think we can. I think we might be competing with the Black Wall Street Times here for most views this week. You know how many views they get. But our guests are going to be ready to talk about this. So I'm talking to, Angelica Solis Montero on Tuesday, Angie Camacho on Wednesday, Edith Bazil on Thursday, and I'm so excited. Natasha Sherry Perez on Friday. Can't wait to talk to her.
And our friend Kwame,
too.
And he's an extraordinary teacher and educator.
That's right.
Outside the box thinker. He is the author of The Identity Talk. He's a homie.
Nice.
Love him.
And they better be ready to talk about this poll too.
That's right.
I want to get their feedback.
Yes, we're going to be talking with you about the Bill of Rights and what you think about our
That's right. So out of the hosts, we have a bunch of new shows this week. We have Tashfir Cosby on Tuesdays with the Parent Impact. Preceded by the Apparent Voice and Bernita Bradley at 4 p.m.
So that's Newark, that's Detroit.
That's Detroit. We have, again, more Jersey, I believe, tonight with Vivette Dukes at 7:30 p.m.
Oh, honey, that is New York.
Oh, yikes, I'm sorry.
Speak your truth, coming to you live from New York City.
Ooh, listen, if you listen, if you get feedback about that, send it to I don't know what to tell you at tim.org. But Vivette Dukes would Speak to Your Truth there. Maybe John will jump on at 7:30 p.m. And then, of course, Thursday, Dad to Dad, 4 p.m.
That's right. Dads across the country. You guys are in California, Massachusetts,
Ohio. Double Ohio.
Dads from across the country coming
there you go.
And joining that show. I love Dad to Dad.
And, of course, our Spanish show at noon.
That's right.
Christina Laster at 2.
Every day at 2 for our families with special needs. Right. And then 9 o'clock, our social and emotional checkout for parents with Marisol Rarucha coming to you live from San Diego. We love her.
It's going to be great.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us this morning. And remember to share this broadcast. And now we are going to welcome some of our incredible guests to our broadcast this morning. I'm really excited.
Me too.
A man who is at our inaugural kickoff of the National Parents Union in
Pretty
New
good
Orleans.
dancer too.
He's an excellent dancer. We're going to put him on blast because that's what we do.
That's right. Maybe he'll dance for us tonight.
Yeah, this is not so serious over here.
No.
We're waking up on a Monday morning with Curtis Valentine from the Progressive Policy Institute, which is a very serious policy institute. Right. But we want to check in with him as a human being, as a member of our tribe and our crew. Curtis, good morning to you and welcome to the broadcast. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Oh, I am blessed this morning. A lot to get to, a lot to talk about. But how are you doing as a human being? How's your house? How's your community? How are you making it through in week 10 now?
Well, thanks for asking. I say my home is like a education ecosystem. My wife is a principal of the largest middle school in my school district. And so she's operating a school right from our dining room table. Both of my children attend our school system. My son is a 6th grader. My daughter's a 4th grader. They learn very differently, but they're in one of our magnet Montessori schools. And so, we've had to put on our teacher hat, our administrator hat. I'm on the Board of Education in my school district. And so we have policy and practice happening in real time right in our home. I say my children are doing much better at this than I thought I thought they would. Very resilient. We've tried to do different types of learning. My daughter fancies herself as a pastry chef. And so teaching math through cooking and a lot of the experiential learning that she brings to the table is something that really is pushing my wife and I to be, better at this. And so I think we're going to come out hopefully on the other end even a little better off trying to understand how our children learn and how to incorporate learning in everyday life.
Curtis, I got to tell you, even in times of unprecedented challenge, we are seeing incredible triumphs, incredible opportunities to innovate, to rethink things. But I want you to keep that dad hat on. A lot of parents are having this conversation about, we are now thrust into this situation where we are expected to step into the role of being educators and help to facilitate that. But our babies act very differently in the living room than they do in the classroom. But now our living rooms are classrooms. My living room is usually more like a wrestling ring than it's like even a living room. So you with so much knowledge, so much expertise, you are oozing education, policy. You got this. If anybody's got this.
Can you tell my wife that? Maybe I put my wife in the room. Maybe she can hear that too,
But has there been anything tricky, any moment where you like, you know what? I'm calling a snow day today because this is not working. We got to stop. Like I've had to do that. I've had to say, you know what? We are not in the right mindset and we're going to try again. We're going to put this all on hold. Like, have you had any struggles, anything that was surprising to you in these moments?
No, I would be lying if I said I didn't. And I talk about this with young men and women who I mentor and who've reached out to me through the years who are in this space. And I say the best way to get through those days is to encourage somebody else. Like when I'm on my lowest, when I'm really feeling like I don't see the other end of this, I'm not confident in government to fix it. The first thing I'll do is I'll pick up the phone and I'll just reach out to someone and say, hey man, I'm really proud of you. I see what you're doing. You're getting through. I read something about you, and so it's this sense of putting out good energy and then getting it back. You don't put it out there to get it back, but you just know that when you give someone positive energy. In my home, I'll do the same thing with my kid. Yesterday, my son was sitting on a couch next to me, and I said, Kirk, come here. He said, what, Dad? And I hugged him. I said, I'm proud of you. He said, like, oh, really? Like, yeah, man. Like, you're doing great. It was so random. It wasn't sort of, but it was. He had been doing so well. His birthday was on Saturday, and he's really good. He gets up early in the morning, unprompted to do his work. He's always asking really good questions. And so I think with my children, the idea is to really just in those spaces, just encourage them, because when you encourage them, they come back and they're very responsive and they'll probably do the same thing throughout the day. And so I need that more than ever, that hug from a kid, from a child that, Dad, what are you up to? Dad, you going to be on Facebook? Oh, that's so cool. Who do you interview? Who's Keri Rodriguez? Like, is she like Oprah? Like, oh, like, all those things, they matter because in the end, we're still human beings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like we got to get you on Dad to Dad. You know, dads going through these moments have a unique perspective, and that's why we've kind of created this program where dads from across the country are coming together and kind of grappling with, you know, issues that have come up during the pandemic, but also the bigger issues of being a dad, like, you know, having those moments of connection and stopping and you know, being able to bond with your kids in different ways and expressing yourself emotionally, how important that is, and how, you know, now's the time where we have a little bit of opportunity to stop and reflect, if we can kind of push back past anxiety and everything else that's going on, to kind of examine those things and how important they can be for our kids. I mean, we talk about, you know, every morning on this broadcast, the idea of mattering, and how the most important thing that we can pass along to kids right now in this moment is just taking those moments to stop, look them square in the eye and say, you know what, you're important, your questions are important, I want to listen to you, I hear you, I see you, and you're important to me, and how that can make a difference. So I love hearing you talk about that.
No, I appreciate that.
So
Yeah, in my school district, I started something called the Fatherhood Forum 5 years ago. And so the Fatherhood Forum is really to increase engagement of fathers in our public school system. You know, data shows that when you have an engaged father, all the stats that should go in the right direction go in the right direction, and all the stats that go in the wrong direction go in the wrong direction in a positive way. Meaning, you know, students being put into special education, students being suspended, you know, young pregnancy rates, all that stuff go down. You know, graduation rates go up, matriculation goes up when you have an engaged father. And so I think what you're doing, particularly highlighting fathers, which, you know, don't get celebrated often, you know, when it comes to this work, is extremely powerful, because it's not just sort of a feel-good, you know, story. It is the gateway to achievement.
So Curtis, I wanna ask you some questions, and I can hear Tim is probably already following up with an email. How are we getting him on Dad to Dad? We need to do this. So I want to ask. Yep, he's poking his head in.
I'm emailing the guys right now.
He's so excited.
I'm emailing the guys right now.
Dads are very important.
There you go.
You know, Curtis, you were there at the birth of the National Parents Union with us in New Orleans, and you know, we have had to change and pivot so quickly, but a lot of the work is so much the same, and the same vibe of what we created there. So I wanted to kind of get your reflections about what you saw, you know, having a firsthand, you know, view of what we were able to build as the National Parents Union, and then kind of tell you a little bit about, you know, what these ladies and gentlemen have been up to in bringing that to the work. So first, what did you think about what you saw in New Orleans and the incredible parent groups and activists and organizers that we were able to bring together?
I was very excited about what I saw in New Orleans. You know, prior to that, you know, my organization had been traveling around the country, really highlighting voices of parents in how they were reforming their public school systems to really provide more accountability, you know, more choice and more autonomy. And so, you know, traveling to cities and then coming to New Orleans and seeing a lot of those same faces coming together collectively, Black, white, brown, all coming together, fathers and mothers, was extremely powerful, because, you know, the work that Reinventing America Schools have been doing had been very city related and bringing parents together with policymakers, with school board members, superintendents, the private sector, foundations. But what New Orleans really did, big for me, was really put it together and saying, wow, collectively, if we could bring all these voices together with an agenda and with the proper training and context for how we go from advocacy to policy change, which is sort of the nexus in which I sit, being both a school board member, but someone who works within a project that really tried to promote a certain level of governance that really gives, you know, parents everything that we believe they deserve, which is freedom to really make the decisions for their children, to see what you all had put together. And then the energy, I think obviously secondly, the energy of people saying, you know what, we don't come to this space sort of from a deficit, we come excited about the future. You really have to be aspirational and vision driven when it comes to children. You know, you all talked about, you know, the graduation festivities over the weekend. I wore my Morehouse College shirt today. It's sort of Morehouse Monday, because when I talk about education, it's about what's the outcome. So like when you're talking to a child, a fifth grader, a seventh grader, a 13-year-old, why am I going to school? Why am I getting up early? Why is this important? Like, what is this going to give me in the long run? And what you all really put together in a word to me is freedom. Like I tell children when I give a lot of graduation speeches, my job isn't to choose whether you become a botanist or a barber, whether you become a plumber or a pharmacist. I want you to have the freedom to choose which one you want to be and not be sort of pushed into it because you weren't prepared or you didn't have the capacity to be both of them. And so what you all did in New Orleans to really, is sort of start this freedom of choice movement in aspiration and in career and in the world that I think, unfortunately, a lot of Black and brown children just don't have.
Yeah, it's so extraordinary when you think about how things have changed just since those moments in January. And I just want you to think back to that room because, so many of those activists, so many of those organizers, so many of those groups. And right now they are doing the most extraordinary things across the country. They are the doers. And that is really what we are, is we are a network of the folks that are doing the work on the grassroots level to make things happen. And in this moment, we were able to see how critical their work actually is, because these are the folks that are connecting families and community with information. The parent engagement channels have long been broken, and we've been singing about that for a very long time, but never has it been more clear than in this moment where these groups have really had to stand in the gap and be the bridge so that parents could get the information and the resources that they need. And these are the folks that are hitting your doorstep every morning, dropping off the Chromebook or dropping off food or an Easter basket, or just making sure that you have a mask or what is going on in your community, because so many of our systems are broken, and we've known that for a long time. They just don't communicate with us. They're not culturally competent, and they don't understand how to actually how to have those relationships. There hasn't been a lot of restorative justice with these communities either, from years of being underserved and the generational institutional racism we've seen. But at the same time, this is really what I want to get into with you, because I know you've got some really important perspective on this. And we have been trying to push these groups that while at the same time they are really on the front lines, they're doing this critical work, but you got to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. Policy is happening without us if we do not step up and pay attention. Can you talk to us about how critical it is for all of our groups, members of the National Parents Union, other groups, to step up and make sure the voices of parents and families are heard? I know you know this. I need you to give us I need you to give us the pep talk this morning and tell us why we need to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time.
Well, the right side is it's already been done. And I think that's the one thing when I talk to young people and activists and advocates around the country. I said, if you just do your homework and if you have a good memory, you'll understand that this has been done. I am a student of history, and I was excited to see that you all brought the daughter of Malcolm X to New Orleans. Because if you do your homework and you look at the civil rights movement, I fancy myself a student of it, and so I do a lot of research on both the modern civil rights movement, but also some work that was happening in California with the Wrath of Grapes, boycott, and Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, and all the work that had been done by Black and brown people around this country. And it started with organizations just like yours and others. But back then they were called SNCC, they were called CORE, they were called a lot of the organizations that at the time I don't think fully understood what they were doing at the time. I tell people, during the civil rights movement, they really didn't call it that. It sort of got that name after, because in the movement, you're just doing it. And the idea that, if we just do our homework, that we'll understand that for folks who started off as advocates, understanding the power and the process of going from advocacy to policy really got us to this point. And when you think about, what it's going to take for us to get there, it's don't let those who oppose us take our history away from us or reformat it in a way that says they weren't regular people. They weren't people who were like you. It's easy to say that, someone like you has never accomplished much. And I say, well, that's a lie. It's a bold-faced lie. They were average people who decided to come together to do extraordinary things. And those who oppose, their best strategy is to oppose sort of inside out, like, what you're going through and what the community is going through is not the same. We have discussions around educational equity and trying to pit, Black people versus brown people, or upper middle class to lower income, and like they're here to take what's yours. The goal and the civil rights movement, to me, taught me that when you bring together Black, brown, rich and poor, educated, and those who are self-educated together, that is the power. And what you all did in New Orleans in many ways brought that together. That's why, to me, it was so powerful. It was very much of the blueprint of the civil rights movement.
Yeah, what you're saying, it just brings me back to a moment where I got to speak with Ilyasa privately and just kind of, really pick her brain a little bit. One of the greatest honors, I think, of my life is when she said to me, like, we see you, we see what's coming together here. My parents would have been right there. They would have been, NPU members, front and center, because they get it. Because the folks that we bring together with the National Parents Union, are folks that, aren't doing this work because it's a hobby. We do this work because we have to do it. It's, I don't get to take a rest. I got 3 little boys that are prime candidates for the school to prison pipeline. Like,
no days off.
And if I fail at this, is not a big, if I fail at this, I fail them. And it's not about, I decided I wanted to start up a little organization. I was pissed. And I was like, there's got to be other people as mad as hell as I am. And we got to come together for justice. And, I think what you're saying is so well said. I think about Julia Pringle in Minnesota. I think about Bernita Bradley. I think about Christina Laster, all of these folks that are building our beautiful union. And they didn't get in this because it's glamorous and they are, people throw rose petals at their feet. This is hard work. They call you everything but the name your mama gave you in this work, but we have to do it. And because that is, I'm a person of faith. I think God gives us this work, and this is the path. We got to follow his will. This is the tough work we've been given. But, I think that's well said. But in this moment, I want to turn us to COVID-19 and what's happening right now, and get kind of your reflection about what you're seeing across, the organizations and frankly, the country. I mean, you're all over the place. You talk to people everywhere, and you have your hand on or your finger on the heartbeat of what people are feeling. But, this morning, we're releasing our national poll about the perspective of American families. And I know you've heard some of the results, including who parents trust when it comes to reopening. Frankly, many parent organizations have been stunned that, they haven't been invited to the table, whether it's in Michigan, whether it's in California, whether it's in Wisconsin, Wyoming, just not part of the decision-making. Folks just deciding we're going to open up or we're not going to open up, or this is what's going to look like without, our consent. These are our children. So when you hear, I mean, the first piece I want to get your perspective on is just who parents trust. And, by an overwhelming margin, again, parents trusting federal, state, and local health officials, not education officials, not elected officials, certainly not Donald Trump, who comes out at 5% in our poll, but trust public health officials, scientists, and doctors. Is that surprising to you?
No, it's not. And I'm glad to see that. I think it's ironic that, what you're doing with your children, I'm doing with my children, is putting them through a system that hopefully on the other end educates them to have choice in career choices. But eventually, if our children decide to become an epidemiologist or a public health official, they'll go off to get educated, and they'll get the power to make decisions based on what they've learned. But at the same time, we're sort of in this space where expertise and experience is sort of becoming undermined. And it's just so counterintuitive. Like, no, the epidemiologists, everyone that you just mentioned who we trust, were people who were students in school systems at some point in time, went through the process of which they were told to go through, and it came on the other end and say, now what? Now we trust you to make decisions for us. And so I am not surprised in the least bit, as a Board of Education member here, we are, we've gone to, going to virtual school board meetings and making decisions about our school system. Prince George's County, where I serve, is the 17th largest system in America, over 130,000 students. And so we went through a process of literally distributing Chromebooks to every student in the county, working with private sector to really ensure that there was internet access, support teachers, administrators like my wife, support parents who are at home, who are doing the best they can. But at the same time, there are things that we just can't do, and that this virtual, space is not allowing us to do. And so particularly with I put my Reinventing America Schools hat on, what we've done over the past month or so is bring together parents like Brian Morton from Camden, who was there, Sarah Carpenter from Memphis, Keisha Young from Oakland, Kim Dukes from Atlanta, and said, hey, what are you all doing under COVID? Last week, we did a similar conversation around, parents from the Latinx community, like Alma Marquez, like my brother Ricardo from Atlanta, and said, hey, Cinta Ramos from Fort Worth, we need to elevate voices of particularly individuals in our community under COVID. This Wednesday, we're going to have a conversation about year-round schools. What is the solution? Solution is parent voice. And whatever parent voice says, that should be the solution. We don't want to be prescriptive. We do want to elevate expertise, and we want to elevate experience, which is what your poll has said parents value.
Yeah, and I'll be excited to share with you the Bill of Rights that brought together so many parent organizations from across the country to really culminate around, okay, what are our terms? What do we want to see? How can we trust? Not just around the health and safety, but these parents were so incredibly thoughtful around what does an equity-infused education recovery look like? How do we do this with intention? Instead of just slamming things together, because frankly, the last 3 months, have just been, it's what we're calling emergency education. There was no plan here. I mean, frankly, political power, special interest groups have been fighting a planning process that would help us through a moment like this for a generation. There's a reason why we're in a mess. And I hope at some point we have that conversation about why we were not so prepared when we could have done this a hell of a lot better and had a plan. But for so long, people so tied to that status quo would not let even the discussion around should we plan, should we evolve, should we have these resources, it was blocked. But these families really saying, like, now is the time. And again, in our poll, by a 2-to-1 margin last week, telling us that parents are not interested in shoving their kid back in the education box. This is the time to innovate. This is time to think of outside the box. They want extended school year. They're looking at longer school days, really thinking about, is this the time and is this the opportunity that we turn this challenge into a transformation? And I know that's a lot of catchphrases, but, Curtis, tell us about like some of the conversation happening on the national level that you're a part of around, that kind of thinking.
No, thank you. And I think, this point in history is going to be similar to the 9/11 story. The idea that there's pre-9/11 and there's post-9/11. It's going to be pre-COVID and post-COVID. But it's going to take people like yourself and others to really make sure that, what happens after is something different than came before. And so again, what we're hearing from parents, particularly of Black and brown students is, in many ways, prior to COVID, our children weren't being served. Our children were going into spaces that were not affirming them. They were being taught a curriculum that was not culturally affirming. They were in school that didn't have teachers who looked like them. They were, in some cases, not being challenged if you were, advanced, and some of them, were not being supported if they were, learning differently. And so what we're hearing from myself, because I engage with superintendents, I engage with school board members, and also I engage with, parent activists on the ground. It's, we need to ensure that equity is at the forefront of everything that we do, that we are not in any way hampered by history. And it's sort of, let's start from scratch. And so this idea of year-round schooling that we're going to have this Wednesday is really going to get into this idea of why not? And we're going to have a state senator who I'm not sure prior to this, he would have supported year-round schooling. But I think necessity is sort of the mother of invention, and that there are people who I believe were not quote unquote reformers before this were saying, Curtis, I just don't know what to do. And I'm not sure whether we'll ever recover from this if we don't throw out the old playbook and say, what does virtual school look like in the future? What is sort of a hybrid sort of, brick and mortar / virtual look like? How do we train teachers differently? How do we recruit and retain teachers differently? How do we educate? How do we measure? How do we assess whether a student is learning well and ready for a career? All these things are things that we're hearing, but also parents saying, I want more choice in where I send my child to school, whether it be a virtual learning space, continue to do that or not, whether it's a year-round school or not, and sort of giving parents that choice to do that, and giving school districts like mine and superintendents and school boards like mine more autonomy to make the decisions on a local level. You'll hear a lot about that on Wednesday, this idea of let's give school boards and local districts more autonomy to choose whether they want to go to a virtual or continue on the virtual, or go to a year round, or go to a different model that may be more dual enrollment at the higher ed community college level. But sort of taking that, taking a little bit of that power from the state level and giving it to the local level to make the decisions is something that I think parents are more supportive of.
Curtis, my last question for you, just double clicking on the autonomy. I love the idea of allowing local decision makers to make the decisions that are right for their context, but not without us. So put your board of ed hat on for me and tell me, what is the most effective way that we can move you as parents? What is going to really ring your bell, get your attention, saying, I better sit up and listen? How can we move you when we need to?
Well, having a very clear ask and being very direct. We want this, and we want this on this date. Two, very consistent. And so I've been, pleasantly surprised when I may hear one parent say, I want this on day one. But over the course of a month, 2-3 months, every single school board meeting, coming to testify, coming with data, bringing different folks who are impacted by that. Maybe one day it's a teacher in support of that. One day it's a parent in support of that. Maybe it's someone from the private sector in support of that. And it's consistent week after week after week. It had gone from an idea someone mentioned to me to us really moving policy. I think, to understand this is a marathon. And if you're consistent and if you're clear, and if you also know who to talk to. So on school boards, there are folks who sort of voices are a little bit more, louder on certain issues, and sort of being also working smarter, not harder, within your local context to say, who should I speak to first, and being very strategic. And so just to reiterate, being very clear, being very consistent, and being very strategic. You'd be surprised what you can accomplish, because I've seen it happen right here in Prince George's County, Maryland.
Curtis, thank you so much for being with us. We so value your leadership, your drive, the fact that you are bringing the right folks into the conversation so that hopefully, we get this right. We're fighting for an equity-infused educational recovery. We don't want to go back to the inequity we saw before. This is an opportunity to really innovate and think outside the box. And we're just so grateful that you include us in the conversation. Curtis Valentine, he's the Deputy Director of the Progressive Policy Institute's Reinventing America's Schools project. He's also a dad, he's an educator, he's all kinds of things. And we're just so grateful for his friendship. Thanks for being with us, Curtis.
Thank you. We are just getting started.
Yes, we are. All right, very exciting conversation this morning. Also, before we get to our next guest, just want to shout out to all of the members of the National Parents Union this week and this weekend who were featured in USA Today. I'm just so extraordinarily proud of all of you. And I just want to take a moment to reflect on the fact that, the wonderful families that stepped up and used their voices talking about the crisis in childcare. You cannot reopen the economy without families. And families need childcare, and they need a plan, and they need to understand what's going to happen. And without us at the table to actually raise our voices, you can't get a lot done. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to be effective. And we had 8 families from across the country, members of the National Parents Union family, featured in USA Today, just doing an extraordinary job. All of our delegates of the National Parents Council, our leadership body, stepping up and making sure that the voices of families were heard directly. It's not just about us, folks. It's about making sure that the folks that are closest to the pain are able to speak truth to power. And so it's just an extraordinary article. We'll get that up on the National Parents Union Facebook page in the comment section, so you can read that as well. So excited to welcome our next guests. And we have 2 of them, Brandon Lopez and Kathy Drew. They're from Higher Ground, which is an extraordinary group here in Boston, Massachusetts. So excited that they are joining us. Brandon is a licensed clinical social worker, and he's a parent organizer. And we're just so thrilled that both he and Kathy are here to talk about their very important work. We are in coalition with them here in Massachusetts with Massachusetts Parents United. So we work together and are friends and just are extreme fans of their work in this moment. So welcome to the broadcast. So glad to share your work with our national audience. I think it's an extraordinary example, and we want to make sure that folks across the country can see that parents are coming together, they're using their voices, there are organizations that are lifting them up and serving them so well. So thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thanks for having us on, Keri.
Brandon, I want to jump to you first because you are a parent organizer. You're talking to parents right now. But first and foremost, how are you? This is week 10 of the pandemic. How are you making it through? How are you feeling?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think it's something that we've all had to adapt to. And there's this underlying anxiety that kind of, me and I'm sure a lot of us have. Particularly there's a few family members that have kind of been diagnosed with COVID-19, and gratefully they've kind of been, less symptomatic than most, and so they're recovering really well. But every day is just kind of this underlying anxiety: is my family going to be okay? When are we really going to be able to kind of come together and be able to hug each other again and shake hands before COVID-19, I was really out in the community, going to schools, seeing students, teachers, parents, interacting with everyone. And now it's just kind of, everyone is kind of isolated. And so it's been difficult to adapt, but in order to overcome this, it's something that we all have to do.
Brandon, so well said. Unfortunately, in our Massachusetts Parents United family, we've actually had organizers who tested positive for COVID-19. Luckily, did not have severe symptoms. But when it's so close to home, it hits you right between the eyes, and it's just it's extraordinary to see how much life has changed in such a short period of time. Or organizers like us that are used to being in community with others, and we thrive on having that interaction. It's a tough moment. Kathy, how are you? How are you surviving the pandemic? How are things going in your house and in your neighborhood?
Well, I'm a grandmother, and so I'm not having the wrestling match in my living room. You are. And my son, who's quarantined in Portland, Maine, and my 4-year-old granddaughter, who's quarantined in Katona, New York, are doing a dance competition.
I love it.
So often we get a video, and it'll be that sweet little Naomi Drew Gill dancing, and my son's watching it. And once he puts his kids to bed, he sets up his computer and dances back to her. So it's been pretty good. Yeah.
I would say, Kathy, again, this is an unprecedented challenge, but it's also such an extraordinary opportunity. We've been talking with parents across the country about how this has kind of opened up, through Zoom and video conferencing. Some families are actually seeing more and interacting more with each other now because, we have that need for community when we're in crisis and going through a trauma like this. So there is joy to be found in craziness, and connecting with your uncle sounds like an awesome way to get through the quarantine. That's awesome. We love a good dance party in this house too. So it's you guys are so connected to the communities and to families, and that's why we wanted to talk with you. And certainly, why we in Massachusetts and the National Parents Union, why we love Higher Ground is you really understand that these fights around issues and policies and things that happen, they don't happen in isolation. They're an ecosystem. So you can't, like, our philosophy with Massachusetts Parents United is our number one priority is safer neighborhoods. Making sure our families are living free of violence, and also, away from the threat of ICE, frankly. And that means so many different things, you know, affordable housing and food stability, critically important to families. And then we can talk about education, because that's our hope for the future, that our kids won't have to struggle in the same ways that we did. But gosh, understanding that it's comprehensive, that these things don't happen in isolation is critically important. So Brandon, I want to ask you, how has the connection been with your families? Have you been able to connect with parents, and what have those conversations been like, and what are they saying to you?
Sure. And so I've actually been able to connect with a lot more families than before, because rather than everyone's kind of at work and kind of have all these things to do out and about, everyone's at home. And so in a way, parents have been more accessible. And so higher ground, we have a variety of initiatives. And so, Kathy and I, we've been working hard to hand out $100 Visa gift cards to families, still working on connecting families experiencing homelessness to housing opportunities. And so when we call families, they've been more open and more accessible to kind of work with us so that we can kind of connect them to the resources that they might need. I think, unfortunately, a lot of the things that I've been hearing are, people are losing family members, and this is really kind of shining a light on all of the disparities as well, in terms of that our families are experiencing in terms of education. Internet hasn't become just something that's, oh, everybody has internet, but it's, it's more of like a privilege, and in a sense, a lot of families are really struggling to kind of, juggle all of these tasks of putting food on the table, educating their child, and also coping with the impacts on one's own mental health of losing a family member. And this is, really demonstrating how difficult it is for, a lot of our families more than others.
Yeah, Kathy, let's dig into that, because the families that we both work with are the families, again, closest to the pain, especially in this moment. If you haven't lost your job, or if you're undocumented, so many of our families have lost their businesses without any safety net of support from the federal government and being able to access resources. But if you do have a job, our families are the essential workers. We're the folks that are being exposed. School is out, but you still got to work if you want to hold on to your house. Sometimes that's very tenuous, and you're trying to figure out housing at the same time. Then there's all these expectations around what you've got to do for your kids. But you're putting your life in jeopardy. You're seeing your friends and family suffer, sometimes die from COVID-19. But there's this extraordinary level of stress. The weight of the world was already on your shoulders. It's now the weight of the universe. How are you helping parents? I don't even know how to formulate the question. How are you helping families, kind of eat this elephant one bite at a time? Or, how does this happen?
Well, Brandon and I talked to a lot of families who are in shelter, or who are, sometimes living in their cars. So, people who don't even have one of the frontline jobs. What I've said about the work that we've been doing, and I've been at this for a few years, the resilience of these people is extraordinary. I'll reach someone in a shelter, and I simply know, the things that have happened in her life over the last, weeks or months. And, she'll answer my phone call with, "Kathy, how are you?" And, the thank yous abound. It's really, I always feel uplifted. And, there's often a request, but there's a steadiness to people. I don't know how they find it. We talked to a teacher this week who was describing a learning disabled child, and that her mother had COVID. And the child is having so much difficulty accessing her Zoom classroom. And now her mother's very sick, but her mother's still trying, still talking to the teacher, still talking to the little girl. So the strength in the extremely disadvantaged community is astounding to me.
I'm getting emotional just thinking about that situation, because, a lack of access to resources does not mean a lack of love, especially a mother's love for her children, still trying to fight no matter what. And the idea that, education would still be important when, you're in the midst of unprecedented trauma, crisis. We've never been through any of this before, and trying to walk through it as if, oh, we're just home. It's not, traumatic to have to, suddenly not be able to talk to people or go near people. And then, the double trauma of having to go through a situation where you're living in your car and you're not sure how to keep your kids safe, and you're not getting access to information, and people aren't talking to you. I think that's why it's so important that you guys are doing this critical work. So Brandon, tell me a little bit about, I know you have a number of different initiatives, a number of different ways that you're helping families. Could you highlight maybe the 3 most important ones, and what you might need help with, how we can support you?
Sure. And so I think some of the main initiatives that we're really talking about, that we're really focused on, is one is the Family-Led Stability Pilot. And that's where we've worked with a network of 4 different schools to house families who are experiencing homelessness, and whether they're in a shelter or doubled up, or how some people like to define it as couch surfing. And so I think one of the main things, particularly in Boston, that we could really use help with is in Boston public schools in general. If we can get the word out, one thing that you mentioned was access to information. A lot of people are in the dark. And so if we could let them know that right now, Boston Public Schools and Boston Housing Authority are working together, and Boston Housing Authority has provided over 1,000 housing vouchers for particularly families in BPS. And so if a family is experiencing a homelessness, whether they're in a shelter or doubled up, there might be a housing voucher right now that you could have access to. And so one thing that would be incredibly crucial is really making sure that families know about this.
Brandon, I got to tell you, it's so frustrating in these moments, like those of us who've been advocates for, transforming family engagement and really shining a light on the lack of engagement, or the problems, or the inequities, or the cultural competency problems that we see in family engagement. It makes me so mad knowing that there's 1,000 vouchers waiting for families, and there are so many families that would line up and wait for hours to get access to the paperwork to do it if they knew. But our channels are just so broken. I mean, in last week's Boston School Committee meeting, it was clear, like there are some students even now, 2 months in, that have never logged into Google Classroom, that have never accessed, because they don't have access to Wi-Fi. You can drop off a Chromebook in a hotspot if you have an address. If you don't, you can't. Many parents, are struggling with digital literacy issues, regular literacy issues, and we're not doing a good enough job of communicating with ethnic media to make sure that, the trusted ambassadors are getting the information so that it actually gets out to families. So it's extraordinarily important that we just have that transference of information, and that we talk to the right people so we can hand off the information and do it without ego. In this moment of crisis, we got to kind of get over our turf wars about no, parent engagement is fine. We're great with families. We can. You can't. Let us help. Let us step in. Kathy, what more can we be doing? How else can we be supporting these families in your work?
So Brandon and I are working on a virtual summer learning academy. And this is something that's available through Boston Public Schools and Boston After School and Beyond. And we had planned this to be like a summer camp with 3 hours a day to be academic learning, and then 3 hours a day enrichment. And we're all speaking frequently now to redefine what can be offered, since it's extremely likely that kids can't be together. So while we're trying to figure out the logistics, we're not doing as much as we could do to reach out to families and let them know that this is going to be available. One thing that excites me, I listened to Curtis talk about curriculum that's culturally affirmative, and that I'm a former teacher, and that means so much to me. And I think even in this short planning horizon for our Summer Learning Academy, we're thinking about curriculum that engages families and their history and their stories. And so I'm hopeful that.
Okay, let us know if we can help, because we have been talking about Afrocentric curriculum, Latino-centric curriculum. Like, we are really diving into using this opportunity, because right now parents are curators of curriculum. We are the educators, and we can't pick and choose about how we are introducing knowledge to our children right now. And knowledge is going to come in a wide variety of ways, and in a wide variety of styles, including what is provided by the district, but a unique opportunity. So, I'm thinking about Kulia Pringle in Minnesota, who does this extraordinary outreach with Afrocentric based curriculum and encouraging folks. There's just through the National Parents Union, we have a lot of resources, a lot of parents that are really curating that stuff. So we'd be happy to collaborate and send you along some resources that might be helpful too.
Thank you.
Well, I just want to thank you guys so much for joining us today. Our friends from Higher Ground, just doing extraordinary work, out there in the field. Like, what is so extraordinary and important about, our conversations here in the morning is that we want to make sure we lift up the folks that are doing the work directly with parents. And so really understand what the context is, what the needs are, and what the realities are for so many families. I mean, so often, you're picking up the newspaper and you're reading the story about, oh gosh, mom is tired of sitting on this not ergonomically correct chair in her kitchen while she's, that, like, as if that is the biggest crisis parents are dealing with right now. When you have parents in Boston who are living in their cars, in Los Angeles, where there's a homeless epidemic, where parents are just struggling to stay alive. We want to make sure that, we're making sure that the folks who are really dealing with the most critical situations are being heard. And so we so appreciate you and everything that you're doing, and love being in collaboration with you through the Massachusetts Educational Equity Partnership. So thank you so much to Brandon Lopez and Kathy Drew joining us from Higher Ground in Boston. Have a great morning.
Take care and stay safe.
Wonderful to have those friends on this morning.
That was great.
That was great. It's
That's
fantastic. Did you have a little coffee, Tim?
Had a little coffee, had a little cake. Not gonna lie, might have had a little bit of cake for breakfast.
Cake already?
Cake for breakfast. It was a good cake.
Well, it's week 10.
It's always time for cake.
Week 10 of the pandemic.
National Parents Union Facebook Live viewers, what do you think of cake for breakfast? That is the question I'm going to leave you with.
I bet we'll get more engagement on that question than virtually any other question.
It's amazing what we get engagement on.
Yeah,
Yes.
like whether or not little boys are capable of flushing the potty.
Biggest thing, most engagement we ever got.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And consensus from families across America,
Yep.
Little boys do not flush potties. Ever. Big boys do not flush
Nope.
potties. No one flushes the potty except mommy.
Well, anyway, I'm going to put that up in the category along with the Jonas Brothers on how I feel.
Oh my goodness. But stay tuned. You'll hear about our poll.
You're going to hear about our poll?
That's right.
National Parents Union members, you're going to be seeing my Bill of Rights. National Parents Union Bill of Rights, going to be getting that. You're going to be getting it. I know for me, local officials are going to be getting that Bill of Rights. I want them signing on.
We're sending it out everywhere.
Everywhere.
It's been tested. We have the approval of American families.
Everywhere. I'm
They're
saying,
behind us.
well, they're behind us, and so is the everyone from the City Council of Somerville, Massachusetts is going to be getting it.
If we open this window, the City Council president's right behind us. We'll be sending it to him too.
I might just bring it right over to him. I might save an email.
Excuse me. Keep yourself socially
Okay,
distant.
that's right.
We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.